You are listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Archaeotech Podcast, episode 21. I'm your host, Chris Webster, with my co-host, Chris Sims. On today's show, we interview Andrew Reinhardt. He's an ArchaeoGamer, and we're going to ask him what the heck ArchaeoGaming is. If he sounds familiar, Andrew was on the team that discovered the cache of Atari games that were buried several decades ago. Stay until the end for our App of the Day segment. Let's get on to the show. Welcome to the show, everyone. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, Chris Sims.
Hi.
Let's get right to the show and talk about ArchaeoGaming with Andrew Reinhardt. Welcome, Andrew.
Well, thanks for having me, Chris.
No problem. So, Andrew, you've got a BA in archaeology and one in writing as well from the University of Evansville, and an MA in archaeology from the University of Missouri Columbia. That's straight off your LinkedIn page. But some of your other stuff on there doesn't really look like it leads to ArchaeoGaming. So, why don't you give us a little bit more about your background, and then we'll get into ArchaeoGaming.
Sure. I got the bachelor's and the MA in classical archaeology, and during the course of getting those degrees, I've dug at Poggio Civitate, which is an Etruscan site in Italy. I've dug at the site of Isthmia, which is in Greece, and I've also helped fellow graduate students work on their PhDs by excavating in Illinois and in Kansas. And most recently, I was the lead archaeologist at the Atari burial ground in Alamogordo, New Mexico.
Yeah.
When we excavated those copies of E.T. and about 40 other titles, too. So I guess you could say I'm classically trained in archaeology. And, when I started playing MMOs like World of Warcraft, the archaeologist in me was just going bananas. It's like, wow, look at all this stuff. Look at all this history. Look at all this lore. Look at the architecture. Look at everything. And something clicked. And this was back in like 2007, 2008, that archaeology and video games could kind of coexist. And we didn't really formalize things until I put together ArchaeoGaming.com back in 2013.
Okay. Well, let's get you kind of alluded to this a little bit, but let's get right into this because I've got some things. I'm on ArchaeoGaming.com, and you've got a nice little paragraph here to start the thing out for your about paragraph. Now, I understand, you talk about especially things like World of Warcraft, where it's an open world where people can leave things lying around. People can make an effect and an impact on the world, and that's something that can be studied. But you also mentioned stuff like, and I want to talk about that in a minute, but I want to get this out of the way first. You also mentioned stuff like design and function of pottery and textiles and architecture, varying between iterations in a game. That sounds more like, and stuff like that sounds more like just a design thing and not really something you can study archaeologically within the game, because, that kind of stuff you could just theoretically talk to the developer, who's probably some young adult in their 20s right now. It's not like they're dead and they don't exist, but you could go talk to them about that, and then you've got the history of that, and you've got that. Is it really something that needs to be, studied?
Well, yes and no. When I wrote that about paragraph, that was back in 2013 when I started thinking seriously about archaeology and video games. I've actually written to a couple of houses. I've written to Blizzard. I've written to Bethesda to try to get in touch with the designer so we can talk. As an archaeologist, especially as an archaeologist who is specializing in the Greek world, I would have loved, to have gone back in time and talked to people who are designing pottery, for example. It's like, why that shape, or why are you painting like that? And that's not going to happen. And so we're really at a great point in time where if we're studying something that's been actually designed, we can reach out to the developer. We can ask these kinds of questions. But in a way, it's kind of yelling into a black hole.
Right.
These guys are super busy. I'd say most of the designers are still active, doing their own thing, and it's really going to take a lot of luck in order to get in touch with these guys. But then again, if you think of it, from an art historical angle, there are a lot of living artists, who are doing, art, contemporary art, and you can talk to them about stuff, and that's fine. But you're only going to get part of the equation. You're going to get their interpretation, and you're not necessarily going to get all of the answers, to the questions that you're asking here. So, as an archaeologist or as an art historian, there are plenty of other things that you can do and that you can study that don't involve actually, talking to the artist, or in this case, talking to the developer. I'd love to do it. I am still waiting for replies, and I've gotten some response on the blog, and basically it's kind of a quid pro quo type of arrangement. What can I lend to a developer as an archaeologist and trade that for information that they can give me about what it is that they're developing? But that's only part of what ArchaeoGaming actually is the kind of design choices that are happening within a game. There's a lot more to it.
You kind of allude to this, Andrew, and I've got some questions for you. What are some of the questions, like research questions, for example, that you're approaching from an archaeological standpoint that kind of bring it more into the realm of the skill set that an archaeologist could bring rather than strictly an art historian or strictly a designer or strictly an like cultural anthropologist. So what are some of the skill sets, like looking forward to the potentials and the research questions that you see archaeology having a stronger foot?
Yeah, no, this is a terrific question. This is one that I've been kind of struggling with over the past couple of years because, we're talking about archaeology in games. We can treat video games as archaeological artifacts, in a very literal sense. Like with the Atari stuff, it was pretty obvious to say, okay, these things were buried here. We can physically dig them up, and we can see what's going on. Um, and that's part of the equation. But what about treating games themselves as discrete archaeological sites, which is what I think some folks are really doing now. I'm not the only one doing this. There are others, Tara Copplestone, for example, Megan Dennis, Katie Myers, Sean Graham. All of these folks are involved in asking archaeological questions about video games. For me, the main research question is, what do we do in games that are procedurally generated? That is to say, games that are created by algorithms written by somebody. And how are those algorithms interpreted by the software to create culture, to create material culture? What is that like? And what can we learn from it? Because we're finally being able to go into these worlds and see cultures that haven't existed before, and these are basically machine created. So what does that mean? What are we looking at? We haven't really experienced that before, as the human race, and that is a super important question that's been weighing on my mind. Other researchers like Megan Dennis, for example, over at York, she is taking a look at reception. So how are archaeologists represented in games? How is archaeology represented in games? And is that having an effect on the real world? And those are valid questions to be asking as well. For me though, treating the games as actual artifacts and then going in or as archaeological sites and going in to kind of observe artifacts within the game, things that I'm tentatively calling game effects. I can't think of a better word, and it's really bothering me because you call them game effects, you're like, oh, that's really cute, but that's kind of what they are. So things like glitches and bugs that exist in a space and point in time within a game that are then fixed and disappear from the record. Why are they there? How are they created? How do they impact gameplay? How do they impact the gaming community and the economics of the game? Those are important questions, and I think these are questions that are scalable to the real world, to real world archaeology as well. I mean, we seem to be asking the same questions, but just in two different environments.
Yeah, definitely. And I can also see some potentials. We're talking about the real world. It's almost like a meta behavior going on where
Yeah.
you have in the real world a consumption of either a material item, which is a disc, or now we're downloading straight from websites and gaming consoles and all that. But you've got like a consumption pattern, and then you've got a whole economic structure behind it that creates this thing and very specialized tasks to create this thing. And then you have people behaving within the virtual realm. And that's just really interesting to see like all of this interacting in the real and the meta and the virtual. It's kind of neat.
Yeah, the crossover between the real and virtual has been something that's been on my mind as well. Specifically, I publish for the American Numismatic Society, and so we're always talking about coins and currency and economics, and seeing that behavior cross over from the virtual to the real to see how real world markets affect virtual world markets, and actually vice versa. And then you've got things like cosplay, and you've got Etsy, where people are making reproductions of recipes or reproductions of coins or of armor, weapons that they can sell in the real world that are based in the original game. It's just, it kind of blows my mind as far as, what's going on there. Let me see if there's anything else, but yeah, that intersection between the real and the virtual, that kind of middle space or that meta space, is super intriguing to me. I mean, on the one hand, when you're talking about machine-created culture, it's kind of independent of human input. What's going on there and how's the computer kind of thinking about these things. But when you have the culture, for example, if you're in World of Warcraft or Elder Scrolls Online or something like this, you're making things, you're interacting with people, you're trading, you're selling, and you can kind of trace these artifacts that you've crafted, throughout the world to see what's going on. That's super interesting to me.
So let me ask an obvious question that I know some people out there are thinking. Have you and others that are in this ArchaeoGaming field created this field so you can play video games for a living? Now, let's be honest here. Because we're cultural cultural resource management archaeologists, and we kind of got into it just to hike and get paid for it. So I mean, let's just get down to it.
Man, I wish. I've got a day job. All of the stuff that I do, for ArchaeoGaming is done on my own time. Maybe one of these days that'll change, but with I've been gaming since, I don't know, like 1978, 79, back with the original, with the Atari 2600 and then with the Intellivision and then later. And it's always been, that's been my go-to. It's either reading or playing games has been my go-to activity, when I'm winding down from school or from work or whatever. And so if I'm able to mash that up with my other love, which is archaeology, so much the better.
Right.
So if other people are doing this full time, then super. I would love to be there too. But no,
Well,
go ahead.
I definitely understand that. I mean I'm kind of doing the same thing by starting my own company and bringing technology into archaeology. It's my sort of passion is high tech stuff and trying to see how that works with archaeology. So I kind of created that, for myself, and I totally understand it. From just a pure semantics point of view too, is this really kind of anthropology, not archaeology? I mean, you're kind of studying. It's not like there's soil deposition within video games, and you're out there excavating, unless there is.
It's funny. There isn't. But when you're dealing with archaeology, you're looking at stuff.
Yeah.
What have people made, or what have people playing as other people? What have they made, or what has been designed that is kind of showing up and waiting for you in these games, or what is there available to craft? And so, yeah, I mean, anthropology is certainly a big part of it, but the archaeology is basically looking at the remains. What has been built? What is there? What's the story behind that? And you're kind of learning about the human history or the history of some other race, in the games that you're playing. ArchaeoGaming is not really dirt archaeology. We're not. So it is and it isn't. I mean, we can't physically dig through, whatever is going on unless it's part of the game mechanic. Like in World of Warcraft, you've got an archaeology skill and you can kind of dig down and find stuff, but you're not getting any kind of context. You're not getting any levels. You're not seeing how the soil is changing. You're not seeing intrusions or any of that stuff. So in that way, it's not real archaeology as people are kind of expecting it to be. But at the same time, when you're playing these games, there are things that are showing up that are just strange, that are happening in world that you won't see anywhere else. And so you kind of have to think of a new tool set or a new way of thinking about the environment that you're in, because it's not behaving under real physics. It's not in the real world. And so it's operationally different for whatever it is that you're up to. So there's a story that came out, I don't know, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and some guy was playing Fallout 4, which just came out, and he fell in the ocean, and his suit allowed him to breathe underwater. So he's like, you know what? I didn't die when I fell in the ocean, so I'm gonna go walk around. So he went walking around, and he found like part of this structure sticking out from like this coral reef. And there's no reason for it to be in the game. There's no way to get into it. And it just seemed to be tucked away or hidden. So, does this have a function? Is this something that the developers were working on and then left behind? What's going on? And so he like posted the GPS coordinates so people could go in and take a look and go and study. And as soon as I'm done with Alien Isolation, I'm going to play Fallout 4, having just finished Rise of the Tomb Raider, and I'm going to go have a look. So you've got that stuff going on where it's weirdness, and it's part of the game world, but kind of peripheral to it. And so it's a bit strange. And when you're dealing with these kinds of things, I think version numbers, build numbers, time, and those kinds of things help define what it is that you're describing archaeologically, as opposed to digging down to particular deposits and making recordings in that way. It works a little bit differently.
See, I guess the issue I have, especially with your example with Fallout 4, and I haven't played that, and I actually don't play any games really. I got out of it a while back, and I just haven't gotten back into it.
He's too owning.
No, honestly, it all really intrigues me, and it's just in the current phase of business ownership, there's little time for that right now. But I'm not opposed to it. But I just showing you my knowledge on this stuff. I don't really have any. And when you're talking about something like this structure that's underwater, and those questions you asked are valid, did developers leave that there? Is that going to be maybe a future game element or something like that? I don't know. And it's fun to go there and check it out. But you're literally dealing with a world that has a creator and a god for all intents and purposes. Whereas, I'm not a religious person. So I know that in my worldview, everything that we find archaeologically in the real world was put there by a person whose intentions we can't really know, and we may never know. But
Correct.
If you're in... Now, I can understand calling it archaeology and ArchaeoGaming if you're in a world where people are modifying the environment, not the developers, but people are modifying it, after the development. It's been just let to, they basically gave it its initial state, and then it's been left to be altered by the users.
Yes.
So in that sense, I understand it. But in the sense of, say, Fallout 4 with that structure, I have a hard time buying that, because that's really just kind of a cool, fun game thing to find. You know what I mean? It's like finding a hidden coin in a brick in Mario Brothers. I wouldn't call that archaeology. I'd call it part of the game.
Yeah. You raise a great point. With the Fallout 4 example, the question there was, did the developers do this, deliberately, and why is it there? Or was it just a screw up? Were they building out the world and they decided, you know what, we're going to go in a different direction, but we already did this work, so we're just going to leave it because it's going to take us more effort than anything to remove it and do something else. And so in that fact, it is kind of an artifact in that respect, because we just,
right.
We don't know. We could write the guys, but we'll never hear from them. It's like praying, I guess.
Good.
I've always considered these kind of video games to be deist constructions. If you think about Thomas Jefferson and deism, for example, you've got this prime mover who makes stuff and then walks away. It's like, okay, here's the world. Have fun with it. I'm done. I made it. I did my best, and you guys take over. And so you're looking at things like Second Life, for example. You look at things like Minecraft, and
Destiny.
Yeah. So you've got these environments that are built, and then they're just left to spin, and it's up to the community to do with them what they will. And so what you're seeing after the fact is you kind of have two levels. You have the level of initial genesis, and then you've got the secondary level of what the population does to the space after the fact. I think both of those are valid for archaeological exploration. These are both made by people, and the stuff that we're looking at in archaeology is made by people. It's made by design. They're mistakes. They're intentional design choices. It just so happens that for looking at things that were built in antiquity, the people aren't around anymore. But if you're doing archaeology of the recent past, whether it's in the virtual or the real world, we have the opportunity to talk to folks, but at the same time, we can take some time to take a look at what's going on, and ask questions of what's happening.
All right, cool. Well, let's take a short break and come back and talk some more about ArchaeoGaming. Still recording on paper in the field? Hate having to process hundreds of site records when you get back to the office and would rather go straight to report writing and research? DigTech has the answer. Hi, I'm Chris Webster, founder of DigTech LLC, a disabled veteran-owned CRM firm and archaeological technology research and development firm. At DigTech, we're creating applications for smartphones and tablets that will increase efficiency in the field and will keep archaeologists doing what they love, archaeology, and will reduce the amount of busy work in the office. Some of what we do involves enhancing existing third-party applications that are already on the app stores. Use our consultation form on the website at www.digtech-llc.com/tablet, and we'll help you figure out what digital solution is best for you. The cost of going digital is a lot less than you think, and once you do it, you'll wonder why you ever recorded on paper to begin with. Contact Chris over at DigTech, the parent company of the Archaeology Podcast Network, today, and let DigTech help you save paper, save time, save resources, and go digital. Now, back to the show. Okay, we're back. And so I'm wondering, you mentioned a few times sort of the value this has, ArchaeoGaming in general has, but I wonder if you could expand on that a little bit. What would, if you were applying for, say, grant funding, which I can't imagine ArchaeoGaming, if it does, or if people are doing this quote unquote for a living, they're probably in an academic setting would be my guess. And if you're applying for a grant and you're trying to get a funding body to fund you to do this research, how can you tell them what value this has to the greater good? You know what I mean? What information does it give us to know that, some, I don't know, teenagers left some trash around in World of Warcraft, or I mean, what are we learning from this really? What is this getting us?
Yeah, I think folks ask the same questions of real world archaeology too.
Yeah, for sure.
There's always the "so what" question. It's like,
Yeah.
Right, you're doing this stuff, so what?
Yeah.
And so, I think that ArchaeoGaming and real world archaeology are in the same boat. Although it's arguable, that real world archaeology is certainly at the level right now where these are real people doing real things with real artifacts that impact real lives.
My 50-year-old beer cans are important. Damn it! I'm not going to let any rancher tell me otherwise.
Hey, this can had peaches in it.
Nice.
But it's all important to understanding how the world works. And what's really interesting about games and right now, I mean, ArchaeoGaming is still it's super young. It's super young. I mean, we're still figuring it out. Part of the reason I do my blog is just to think out loud and try to figure out where we want to take this. The other folks who are doing ArchaeoGaming in an academic context, as you say, and you're absolutely right. They're kind of up against the same thing. We're kind of pioneers right now with this kind of archaeological science, but at the same time, we're dealing with real people. We're dealing with built environments, and we're asking similar questions about why things were created, how people interact with the world, and how they interact with each other. Whether it's real world or virtual space, it's still the same kinds of behavior that are happening. For me, the interesting question, as I said earlier, is what happens when machines get involved and they start interpreting the rules and start creating stuff. What does that mean? Because we haven't seen that before. And so I'm really curious to see, how machine-created environments and human interaction with those compares with just human-built things and how we interact with those kinds of elements too. I'm pretty sure that I wouldn't be able to get a grant right now. If I wrote and said, I'm studying video games and archaeology, and they're like, yeah, whatever.
Google might give you a grant.
But yeah, they might. But it's a start. And somebody asked me the other day, it was like, what's your goal for ArchaeoGaming? And I said, well, I've been published in a couple of peer-reviewed journals already. I've talked in a couple of professional conferences about this, and the reception's been pretty good. But what I'd really like to do is do some kind of archaeological field report in a virtual space and get that published in just a regular archaeological journal, like the American Journal of Archaeology or one of SAA's publications or something like that, just to be treated on its own as an archaeological report, irrespective of real versus virtual.
Mm-hmm.
Being published in something that deals with artificial intelligence or MMOs or game studies or something. That's fine. But being published in a traditional archaeological journal for some kind of non-traditional site, I think is really the goal that'll show that we've turned the corner.
That's quite a challenge. So, what are the challenges for gaining legitimacy? Like, what are the steps that need to be taken to make that next jump into, the quote unquote respected publications to be taken as an authentic and legitimate field of study?
Um, I think it's time and patience, for one. I mean, for the people who are doing this right now, it's being done, very seriously, very earnestly, and with an eye to detail. So, we're trying to approach this with some kind of academic rigor, and treating these things. And with video games, it's no different than like studying novels and doing literary criticism. It's just a different medium. But with these are like self-contained universes or self-contained worlds that deserve, in my opinion, their own particular study. I have a feeling that as the subdiscipline matures, and as we kind of figure out what we can do, what we can't do, what are the good questions to ask, what are the stupid questions, um, that ultimately we'll get to a point where we'll be able to articulate something that a real world archaeologist can take a look at. Um, and thinking about this just now, I'm trying to think about why it's necessary to justify the archaeology of a virtual space to archaeologists in the real world. I mean, I think for the most part, I mean, most of us who are doing ArchaeoGaming started doing archaeology in meat space. I call it meat space, and this is coming from Neuromancer by William Gibson, where you're dealing with the flesh world. We've all done archaeology there, and so we're kind of gravitating towards these new spaces. Dealing with artifacts that are, I call it material culture of the immaterial. Because we can't hold them, but we can. It's kind of strange. So I'm kind of rambling here, but
It's all right.
but at the same time, I think it's up to us, who are kind of pushing the field forward to demonstrate that what we're doing and what we're asking is really no different than what we're doing and what we're asking for archaeology of the real world, and of archaeological sites there. I think we're going at it in the same way. We just happen to be looking at spaces, and some of these spaces are occupied by tens of thousands, if not millions of people, every day. So, that's certainly worthy of analysis in some way.
I was really we actually talked about this a little bit, which in the field with me, Chris, and a couple other people, when we were on a project out in California. You're walking around in the desert and you start thinking about stuff. But we were we were talking about this, and I was pretty skeptical about ArchaeoGaming, but I hadn't really looked at it enough. But I kind of now see it, especially with worlds that have been given an initial set of conditions and kind of just left to the users. With maybe a little bit of input from the developers to add new features and things like that. But I'm interested in those because it almost seems like if you were to do archaeology in that universe with its different rules, because they do have different rules because often there's magic and things like that, so they have different physical rules. But almost seems like a little version of almost a xenoarchaeology, like an alien archaeology. Like if we were to go do archaeology on another planet, with a different sort of being, that intelligent being that was there at some point, we would have to look at things a little differently. The techniques are the same, but our interpretation is going to be very different.
Yeah, or even processualism or other theoretical frame points where there's no such thing as agency or chaos.
Right.
Yeah.
You got to look at stuff like that. Are there any game worlds that were building on that? Are there any games out there that were built like almost just built by algorithm? They were given a set of conditions and then developed in a certain way and then given to the users basically and said, here, have at it. Is there anything like that? That you know of?
They're gonna be people out there who have a better answer to this question than I do. As much as I enjoy gaming and doing the archaeology of games, my gameplay has been limited. You compare my hours against Tara Copplestone's, for example, and I might have a couple hours in Skyrim, and she might have 4,000. It's
Right.
just so or the suite of games that I'm working with is like 20, and she's got like 400. So it depends on who you ask. But but there are going to be games out there, especially the ones that are procedurally generated. That is to say that the programmers have created a set of rules, they've created an environment, and then they kind of let it go, and it does its own thing. Um, you you'll have games like that. I mean, Minecraft is procedurally generated. The one that's coming up in June now on PlayStation 4 and on PC is No Man's Sky, which is the one I've been waiting for years now, and a lot of other people have been thinking about this in the same way, because we want to see billions of worlds created by math, basically. And what does that mean? And what do we do with those? What kind of questions do we ask? How do we explore them? How do we document it? Um, the exoarchaeology, the xenoarchaeology is certainly part of this, and we're kind of playing right now because most of the games that we have are fixed spaces. They're finite. They might be open worlds, but they're really boundaries. And so we're kind of playing in a sandbox at this point. But when those games come, when No Man's Sky comes, and when the games after that start showing up that are really infinite, um, and create things by code, how do we what do we do as archaeologists? It's like we haven't experienced this before. We don't know. And what is it from these kind of explorations that can help us when it comes time to exploring or documenting archaeology on another planet somewhere? We don't know. We're figuring it out, but it's going to take some time.
Do you know if Second Life is the only online world that doesn't have like a goal or a quest structure? Because I know you can get into Second Life and just exist. There's no real goal. Is there anything else like that, or do they all have sort of an underlying,
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, you play The Sims, for example.
Oh, that too. Yeah.
Yeah. Apologies to Chris.
I played The Sims for 3 months.
So you've got stuff like that where my kid does this. She comes down in the morning and she turns on The Sims and she like makes things and interacts, and she doesn't really like play the game. She just plays with stuff.
Yeah.
She makes stuff, she gets downloadable content, and she kind of exists in the world. Just as a place where she can showcase fashion and things like that. That's fine. With Second Life, it's not really a game. There's always that classic debate: is it a game? Is it not a game? Well, who cares?
Right.
It's a virtual space where you can go and do it in whatever you want. And I had a great experience, actually. And there are other folks out there. Sean Graham, for example, Colleen Morgan, recently went back to Second Life to do some exploration there in an archaeological way. I created when I worked for Bolchese Carducci Publishers, back from 2007 to 2010, I created a Latin-speaking villa in a place called Roma SPQR. And I went and I built the villa. I hung it with posters with like Latin phrases and questions, so that people could come in and have discussions in Latin and stuff. And then I quit that job to go to the American School of Classical Studies at Athens and was there for 4 years. And then at the conclusion of that, I'm like, you know what? I haven't been in Second Life in like 4 or 5 years. I wonder what's going on. So I went back to my sim. My villa was gone, but the people were there. The same people who I had met 5 years ago were still there, and they were still building. They remembered who I was and where my plot was. And they showed me around and said, look at what we built here, and look what we built there. And it's vibrant. And then you've got folks like Colleen Morgan and Sean Graham who go back into Second Life, and their place is a wasteland. There's nobody around. Things were either exactly how they left it or had been wiped off the map. And so, it really depends on where you're going in these worlds as far as what you'll see. So, in my case, I got really lucky, and that it was still a vibrant community, and others, it's a ghost town.
Do you think these really, thinking a little bigger here, do you think these really involved, detailed, thousands of users, if not tens of thousands or more, lands like Second Life and even like World of Warcraft and things like that have been around for a really long time at this point? Do you think, this might sound silly even saying that, but do you think they could ever reach like National Register status? Like, for example, if the people at World of Warcraft just decided, listen, we're shutting our servers down, kick everybody out, we're getting rid of it. Do you think somebody could stop that and say, no, this is too important, you're going to destroy this virtual landscape that a lot of things have happened on? Do you think is that crazy?
Nothing is crazy when it comes to ArchaeoGaming. It's like, yeah, I don't know. It's like anything goes. with with WoW, I mean, you can't really build things. I mean, you can craft things and you can have your guild and you can go do stuff. And there are documented instances of guilds, that do things like weddings in world, and they'll film it, as machinima, or there'll be actions that happen, in the world with guilds and various factions and whatever, that create a history. And this is also true in places like EVE Online, for example, where they're actually parts of the historical record of that MMO, of things, that go on in that space that affect globally, the kind of the universal community. If WoW was going away for whatever reason, if Blizzard was going to start, closing some servers, it might be possible to file some kind of injunction or something saying, hey, this will not stand, because so much has happened here that has affected thousands of players, that it needs to be preserved. I don't necessarily know that would happen in contemporary games as we see them now, but maybe in 10 or 20 years when they're more, kind of robust open worlds that allow for this, additional city building and world building and building of community, where all of a sudden you've got things that are happening that are important in there, that are almost as important as things that are happening in the real world, that would require some kind of preservation. That's super interesting, and I'm going to think about that all night.
Well, I guess, one thing I was thinking about was, let's take Second Life as an example, because you can do almost anything in Second Life. In fact, one of my first exposures to that was when they were Science Friday had a virtual island on Second Life, and in fact, Ira Flato's character on Second Life was called Ira Flato, which I thought was brilliant. Even though it is a three-dimensional sort of space, he was still called Ira Flato. But anyway, so you could go there, sit with your little character in a lounge chair, and listen to the show, and you could see his character doing his little weird, movement thing. But really, you're just listening to the radio show, right? They're just piping that through live, and so I guess the question would be, let's say you get some, like Obama really changed things from a social media standpoint, when he was running for president the first time, right. and people are starting to ramp things up like that. Well, what if somebody sees that as a voting community and decides to have some sort of rally in Second Life, and it makes some pronouncement, or we dig back through the history books and find out this is where everything changed. This speech is where everything changed. That becomes National Register eligible. But did it really take place in Second Life? Because all those people were physically somewhere, but they all met virtually in Second Life in one digital spot, so to speak. I mean, what do you even do with that?
Wow.
You're pretty intense. I mean,
you're blowing my mind.
Yeah.
That's totally realistic, though. That could happen right now.
It totally could.
I think in a way it is happening with like Anonymous and hacker groups like that, who are really like using cyberspace to impact real world changes in very big, social, political, and economic ways. So it's to kind of come back to Chris's question, is like, how do we define that as like an important historical event or social document or anything like that? Like, is it the coding language, or is it, like, where does that happen?
No, it's always going to be with the people. If somebody's making a pronouncement in Second Life, they're probably doing it wrong, because I don't necessarily know that a lot of folks are logging into Second Life now. Although I'm following Linden Labs on Twitter, and they're getting ready to do like a renewed Second Life or something. But I don't know a single person who's in that world right now. I don't know who's there, what they're doing, or why. But there are going to be other games or other environments where something like that could really happen. People will record it. They'll do it on Twitch or YouTube Gaming or something like that, and they'll have that preserved. It's like, this happened. This is when. This is who was there. And so we'll have that historical record. It's almost like having your own video game created Zapruder film, where
Nice.
where you've got a lot of folks, with a lens on what's going on in the virtual space. And granted, we're dealing for the time being with flesh and blood people.
All these things we make no apology, are the study of archaeology. But we don't do dinosaurs.
Did aliens build Stonehenge? Did the Easter Island statues walk? Did the Vikings colonize Midwest America? What does mainstream archaeology have to say about all of this? Listen to the Archaeological Fantasies podcast and learn about popular archaeological mysteries. Hoax or fact? Learn to tell the difference with Dr. Kenneth Fader and co-host Sarah of the Archae Fantasies blog. Check out the show on iTunes and Stitcher Radio and at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com/Archae Fantasies and get ready to think critically. Let's get back to the show.
Funny beady blokes you will see are a staple of archaeology.
All right. Well, that last segment probably cut off a little abruptly because we had a little Skype hiccup, a little lag, which should be familiar to anyone on a gaming discussion. So, unless you're in a Google Fiber neighborhood, which are all coming around. I was just in Charlotte, North Carolina, and there's Google Fiber signs all over the place. So if you're in Charlotte, it's on its way. Yeah.
Nice.
I know. You can look on our website. I can't remember what it is and find out what the list they're rolling that out at. But anyway, let's wrap up some ArchaeoGaming here. I want to talk about what you think, Andrew, about the future of ArchaeoGaming, but I want to step back real quick and sort of meld two things we were talking about. You're talking about sort of legitimizing ArchaeoGaming in the academic space, and also we were just talking about Second Life. It seems almost like a no-brainer that there should be some sort of Second Life conference in this whole era of green and let's lower our carbon footprint. Why hasn't there been more Second Life conferences out there where people just meet in that space? You can even show a PowerPoint if you want, and videos and whatever. So why do you think that hasn't caught on?
I don't know. I mean, I think a Second Life is a platform. I think a lot of folks have grown beyond it, or there are other ways to do those kinds of conferences. For example, Sean Graham hosted an online ArchaeoGaming conference a few months ago, and it was all done through like Google Groups and Skype audio and stuff, and it was great. We had like 20 people, 30 people show up, and we all had breakout rooms and everything, and it was terrific, and it was an international affair. There are people from the US, from Canada, from Germany, from the Netherlands, from the UK and Canada, and it was outstanding. So having it in Second Life, I mean, it's certainly possible. I did the world's first Latin conventiculum in Second Life back in like 2008 or 2009. And we had a few people, from different continents show up to talk Latin at each other, and that was a lot of fun. But there are other online venues that don't necessarily have to be in a gaming world or a virtual space in order to do that kind of thing. And it's already been done. Although it's interesting that there's a Flesh and Blood conference happening in the Netherlands, coming up in April, with the Value Project in Leiden. And so we'll be having a meetup there in person. And for those people who can't attend, they'll be able to attend online and participate.
All right. So to help sort of wrap this up, Andrew, where do you see the future of ArchaeoGaming? Or to put it a better way, where do you want the future of ArchaeoGaming to go?
Wow. I seem to be the most vocal ArchaeoGamer out there, which is fine. As I see it, there's so much to do with ArchaeoGaming. Back in December of 2015, I created this map of kind of where I thought ArchaeoGaming is and where it can go. And it's everything from real world excavation of video games to video game history, to treating video games as archaeological sites and looking at artifacts within those, to considering the philosophy of the video game and seeing how world building, how that works and how players interact with that, to dealing with things like quantum entanglement, where it's gamer interaction with the video game that creates artifacts within the world, to archaeological reception, to talking with game developers and how they come up with their ideas and what that means for the community, to machine created games and machine created culture, to the archaeology of specific video games, to just looking at general or generic material culture, within these virtual spaces. There's so much to do. Not one person can do it all, and traditionally I've been a generalist anyway, and so being able to kind of create the roadmap has kind of been my main responsibility, and whoever's coming next will be able to kind of cherry pick, these specific avenues to follow, in order to, do something a little more concrete with, with the video games that are out there now, as well as things that were created in the 70s or 80s, that deserve some kind of archaeological notice.
Okay. You mentioned earlier, just as another sort of follow up to this whole thing, you mentioned earlier trying to talk to developers, not really getting any responses. But have you guys had any feedback from developers of these games that you're talking about in your peer-reviewed publications and things like that? And is anybody trying to talk to them about making the archaeology or making the the representation of even just their online digital artifacts and things like that better, from an archaeological standpoint?
Yeah, I've had contact with a developer who's chosen to remain anonymous, who basically said that they follow the blog because they think it's interesting, but at the same time, they think we're kind of missing the point as far as archaeology and games are like, we're just making a game, man. It doesn't mean anything. We're just making a game, and from an archaeological standpoint or from an academic standpoint, that's only part of the story. There's always something else going on that's peripheral to the developer doing something.
Right.
And so there's that debate going on. With the response to basically kind of lobbying developers to make either the archaeology better, or to use an archaeologist on staff, or to consult with them with the creation of the games. So far the gaming industry isn't really interested. One of the developers who wrote back said, "We hate these kind of idea guys, who kind of sit back and say, wouldn't it be great if you did this?" They hate that. So the development teams are very insular, and they do their own thing, and they're trying to make an entertaining game that will make money. Unless you're talking about like indie games, and indie games, they'll want to make money. They'll want to be able to at least recover their development costs, but at the same time, they can still be a little open-minded towards, these other avenues of thought. But, we as archaeologists have to be able to bring something concrete and useful to a development team, where they might actually consider using this stuff. I've always been a fan of saying, well, why don't we have achievement points for people who protect cultural heritage as opposed to people who are destroying this? Or, let's give achievements to those who do not choose to loot versus people who loot stuff to sell at auction house. So, we've got that stuff going on, and I doubt we'll be listened to, just because it's commerce. It's an industry. Its primary goal is to entertain, but also to make money. If we do get heard, great. We can keep shouting into the wind. But if not, that's just part of how the world works. And, there's plenty of other stuff for us to be doing too.
Well, Andrew, it's been really great hearing from you. And from my perspective, it's really fascinating to hear more and more about ArchaeoGaming and the development of that as a field of study. And I'd like to see it succeed, because I think it has a lot of importance for broader society and also for the way archaeology is done, because at face value, it's just one more mode of engaging in public outreach and, branching out and thinking outside the box. But then, as we touched on earlier, we've also got, its implications for various theoretical perspectives. You've got memes and symbols and, economic and socio-political aspects, and then behavior and all that. And so it'll be really neat moving forward to see the results of studies in archaeogaming and how they might inform other avenues of archaeology.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on the podcast, guys. And I think you're absolutely right. There's opportunities to deal with all these questions, and it's really exciting for me, to think that this stuff will happen, after I'm gone. People will still be asking these questions, and the science will proceed. I'm only 43, but I'm already thinking of my own mortality here. But we're kind of creating the archaeology of the future at this point. And what we're doing now, these kind of baby steps, we're really setting the stage for what's coming next. And the better job we could do right now to make sure that we've asked the questions that we want to ask and that we have the tools that we need to use, the better we set up our the people who are coming next for doing this kind of work.
I almost think you need to change the name of it from ArchaeoGaming to something else, because it seems like with the advent of Oculus Rift and things like that coming out, it's going to move beyond games into more virtual worlds, I would assume, that people just interact in. Maybe not in the next 5 years, but maybe in the next 10, 15, 20 years, we'll be sitting in our fully immersion suit lounge chairs and just interacting online with our pressure sensitive, maybe I've seen too many movies, I don't know, but that's coming.
I hope you're right. We can also go down the Ex Machina route where
Right,
let's interact
right.
with robots, flesh and blood and the digital come together in potentially disastrous ways. So spoiler alert.
Yeah.
but I'm with you there. I mean, right now it's games and virtual spaces and archaeology, but it's going to be something more in the future. Whatever that neologism is going to be, I don't know. But it should change. I mean, everything that we do, is temporary and is subject to review. So whatever we do now will either be overturned, overwritten, edited, or created anew, 10 or 20 years down the road. And I'm totally fine with that. And I hope it happens.
Nice. Well, thanks a lot, Andrew. And if you got anything else you want to come talk about, just let us know. We'll bring you back on the show.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. You bet.
All right. So we're back for our App of the Day segment. It's just Chris and I, and we're going to talk about two apps. There's no real theme for these apps. We just two apps that we wanted to talk about today. So, Chris, why don't you go first?
Yeah, so the app that I've chosen for this segment is Soil Web for the iPhone, and it is an app companion to the Web Soil Survey by the National Resource Conservation Service and the USDA. If you've done soil descriptions or soil survey information in your CRM work, you're probably very familiar with that website because it's a lifesaver. Some places don't have web soil survey coverage, or at least not very good. I've had to go and look at like actual books and maps and stuff, and it's incredibly time consuming. And so when this app worked, and that's kind of the main sticking point for this review, it was even more time effective. I could be out in the field filling out a site description, filling out a site form, and I could be done with my site form and have everything done with my soil information and all of that before I ever left the field. However, the last time this app was updated, I'm looking here on
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now.
Store. Yeah, was June 14th of 2010. So
Yes.
I say maybe 9 months ago, this app just stopped working altogether.
Yeah.
And so when you download it and load it up in your iPhone, it just hangs up on you, or it'll stick at the beginning and the help tutorial menu, and it won't go beyond that. So don't waste your time with this app. It used to be great. I would love if this thing came back online because it's fantastic, but doesn't appear to have any support anymore now that we're almost 6 years later after its last update. That's an eternity in app time.
Yeah, and if you do download it and you've got an older phone, it does require iOS 3.1.2 or later. So, check for this. Might actually work for some archaeologists, because I know some of these people, man, they've got iPhones that are 4 or 5 years old and they're still hanging on. So maybe.
I'm surprised it hasn't self-destructed yet.
Yeah, me too. So, and I did notice that the one for iPhone is called Soil Web for iPhone, but there is an Android version that's just called Soil Web. And that hasn't been updated since June 10th of 2011. Current version 1.3 requires Android 1.1, if that tells you anything. I don't even know what number Android is on, because they don't really use numbers. They use food. So what is it, marshmallow or something right now? I don't even know what number that is. So yeah, it looks like a great platform, but they just need to update it. Maybe if people go in and write reviews and say, update this app or email them or something like that, they'll do something. I imagine with this kind of agency, though, it comes down to a funding issue. They just don't have the money to hire. They hired developers on a one-time basis to create these apps and then never looked back, would be my guess. Yeah. All right, so that'll be in the show notes if you want to go check it out, just to take a look at it. But
don't check it out.
Don't check it out if you know it's good for you.
Save yourself.
Yeah. You want to do some Archeo, there's ArchaeoGaming, which we just talked about. There's also some sort of Archeo app development. You could mine the Google Play and the iTunes store for these old apps that just don't work anymore and look at their history. I see a thesis coming on.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to talk about an app that does work, depending on your definition of work. It's a little interesting. It's called Things, and it's only for Apple and iOS devices, unfortunately. But they've got a Mac version that's full software price. It's $49.99, and then the iOS version, which includes an Apple Watch app functionality, is $9.99. And I downloaded this when it was actually cheaper. I think it was about $5, and that was about 3 or 4 years ago. And it's a pretty decent app, I gotta say. It has iCloud support, which means if you're using it across multiple devices, it will update on all those devices, which is handy because it didn't always do that. But basically, this is just a really high-powered task manager application. You can create areas, they call them. Like, let's say an area could be, I don't know, a project. Like if you're using this for CRM, an area I would create would be, say, the last project we did, the last field project. And then within that, you have projects. So you can't think of it like archaeology. You have to use their terminology. So you create the area that is your overall project. Then you create the areas inside, or the projects within that area. That would be, say, the literature search or the field work or the draft report or the final report. And then you create tasks within those that you can put any number of tags on. I like to use tags for people. Say, this person is doing this person doing this, so then I can click on their tag and see all the tasks they have and when that task is due. And they can go in if they're using the same account and check their stuff off, and you can look back through the history and see when those things were checked off. If there's things you do all the time, you can favorite them, and they just appear as tasks that you can constantly check off time and time again, which is a little bit weird, but it'll give you push notifications every day saying, hey, it's 9 a.m. Here are your tasks for the day that are due today. It's a pretty powerful task manager. I'm not so sure that it's 100% necessary unless you really love using task managers. I like it. I use it all the time, but I'm really into it, and I'm trying to keep multiple balls in the air as far as scheduling things. So, when it comes down to that, it's pretty good. But otherwise, if you think that you have a lot of tasks and you want to be really uber scheduled and the devices you're using right now just aren't cutting it, then I would go ahead and download this and use it. But because it's not cheap, like I said, $10 for the iOS application and then $50 for the other one. But I think, and I'm looking at this right now, so this was updated, unlike our last app, on November 19th, 2015. So they are hot on this this application. It's been updated for the iPad Pro. It's been, which means people are using it. They're getting a lot of support, so they're keeping it updated. And let me see here. I can't tell on here. I think you do have to buy it for both iPad and iPhone if you're going to want it on both. It doesn't look like it's a universal application, but I can't really tell that in this interface. So anyway, those are our 2 apps for the day. I think we're going to go ahead and kill this podcast for now and come back next time. Chris, you got anything else about our apps?
Nope.
Pretty much sums it up.
I was on the fence about just going on like a cussing, foaming at the mouth rampage of how Soil Survey needs to get their act together, but no, I'm just gonna leave it there.
Nice, sounds good. Well, we'll talk to you next time. All right. That's it for another episode of the ArchaeoTech Podcast. Links to some of the items mentioned on the show are in the show notes for this podcast, which can be found at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com/archaeotech. If you like the show and want to comment, please do. You can leave comments about this or any other episode on the website or on the iTunes page for this episode. You can also email us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com or use the contact form on the podcast webpage. If you'd like us to answer a question on a future episode, email us. Use the contact form on the website or tweet your questions with the hashtag ArchaeoTech or tag @ArchPodNet in your tweet. Please share the link to this show wherever you saw it. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, you can do so on iTunes or on Stitcher Radio. You can also type the name of the podcast into your favorite podcasting app and subscribe that way. Don't forget to go over to iTunes and leave a review of the show. It helps us get noticed so more people can find our podcast and benefit from the content. Also, send us show suggestions and interview suggestions. We want this to be a resource for field technicians everywhere, and we want to know what you want to know about. This show is produced by Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle, and was edited by Chris Webster.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to archpodnet.com/members for more info.